that we've got to win it all now. And if we don't win it all now, then we're dejected and we're depressed. But in your life, periodically, you have to assess where you are. And you've got to make a decision that maybe I don't have everything that I want right now. I don't have the victory now, but I can plan for the future and declare that if I plan for the future, that I will indeed be able to have the victory. Can anybody declare that now? But unfortunately, we live in a win-now society. We've got to have it all now. We've got to win now. Come on now, how many people here are disappointed the Knicks don't win a championship every year? I know some people say, no, I just want one in my lifetime. I don't need one every year. Just please, in my lifetime. But what the team did so much was they said, we've got to trade all our young talent, and we've got to, right now, we've got to get somebody who can let us win now. But how many times has that worked? It hasn't. And so you can't throw it all away, all of your dream and your talent. You can't throw it all away. You've got to say, I've got to preserve what I have and build on what I have, instead of believing that if I don't have the victory now, it means that I won't have the victory in the future. And so here we are, as we talk about Nehemiah, as we talk about rebuilding. Nehemiah had a vision. Nehemiah, as we talked about last week, Nehemiah got the news that his hometown, where he's from, Jerusalem, was destroyed. He got a report from his brothers, as he described them, that let him know that the walls were desolated. And as we talked about last week, when they got the news, Nehemiah immediately was dejected. Have you ever got news that depressed you? Have you ever got news about something in your life that just was not working out right? But what Nehemiah did, the first thing Nehemiah didn't move from depression to action. Nehemiah moved from depression to prayer. And unfortunately, we so many times, the immediate thing, it's natural. We've got to take action. We've got a financial problem. Oh, I got to get a loan. I got to get a new credit card. I got to borrow some money from here or there. I got to fix the problem immediately. But before you take action, you've got to go to prayer. You've got to pause for a minute. You've got to pray and say, Lord, what direction do you want me to go in? Am I talking to anybody this morning? You've got to pause and you've got to say, Lord, right now, things are not the way I want them to be. But Lord, I need to know what direction you need me to go in. It sounds like a contradiction, but often in our life, the best way to advance is to retreat. You can't immediately move forward. Sometimes you've got to take a step back. In the military, when they're fighting, sometimes they retreat so they can strategize. And in your life, you got to retreat so you can strategize and decide, Lord, where do you want me to be? Because what happens so many times, as we go to the first point about clarity in our life, oftentimes we don't like what we have, but we're never clear about what we want. Did somebody hear that? We saying, oh, I don't like what I have. But have you ever had a clear vision about what you want? Clarity. That's the point that we're dealing with today. Clarity. You've got to decide what you want. So here it is, Nehemiah. We talked about the fact that Nehemiah was strategically positioned. Nehemiah was in the king's palace. Nehemiah was the cupbearer. The cupbearer, as we talked about last week, he had this very distinctive position of tasting the wine to see if it had poison in it before the king drank it. High-paying position. Anybody want to apply for that job? I want to work in the White House. I know some of you don't want to work there now. Maybe 4 years, 3 years down the road. Oh, yeah, I want to work in the White House. But do you want to work in the White House? Would you be the cupbearer? Anybody want the position if it's one of U.S. News and World Report says it's one of the fastest growing positions? Anybody want to study for that? Not too many people. But what it did was it put him in a very strategic position where he was close to the king. So last week we talked about the fact that Nehemiah was in a great position. And you have to realize that God has to put you in a place so he can use you. You may not like where you are, your job, your position. When you think about it, think about your life. Think about how many people you're touching on the job you are now, in your school. We have somebody who works for the Board of Elections who's been working, Harold, who's been working 7 days a week for the last few weeks because of election. But I talk to people, I'm putting Harold on the spot, but I run into people on the street who say, oh, I work with Harold who goes to your church. What a blessing he is on the job. So God can put you in a position where he can use you. And so I want you to ask yourself this morning, as we talk about clarity, ask yourself, why am I in the position that I'm in? And you may be complaining about the job. Oh, Lord, I hate these folk, don't like them, don't like my boss. I could just do without them. I don't have to see them another day, right? Anybody been, you can raise your hand. I know a lot of you been there before. Say, man, I can't stand them. I don't like these. You get on the elevator, you take out your phone and start texting, finding somebody to text because you don't want to talk to anybody. You're like, oh, Lord, I got to find somebody to text. These people on the elevator, I don't like the one on my right or on my left. Let me just find somebody. Mommy, hey, Ma, you just talked to me this morning. No, I talked to you this morning. I just want to say hello again because I don't want to talk to the people next to me, right? But you got to ask yourself. People laugh because, yeah, Pastor, that's me. That is sure enough me. Can't stand these folk. Can't stand my boss. Can't stand my coworkers. Can't stand the person, the people next to me, right? But you got to ask yourself, why did the Lord put me in this position? And you got to realize, do you realize, if you think over the course of the conversation you've had, anybody have people come to you on your job? They know you go to church, they don't go to church. So they say, I'm going to come get my blessing through you. I want you to pray for me when you go to church. I know you said, no, you got to go to church for you. But if they don't, right now, the Lord is using you. So Nehemiah was in a strategic position. Nehemiah was devastated. Can you imagine if you found out wherever you're from, he found out the walls had fallen down. But not only had the walls fallen down, but they had been trying for over 50 years, close to 100 years, to fix the walls. And so somebody comes as Nehemiah, the walls, they're still desolated. And Nehemiah, he broke out into tears, he wept, and he prayed. And then when he went before the king, he was in a strategic position because the king noticed something. It says he noticed from his countenance. He noticed from his face. And sometimes we wear our pain. And the king saw his pain on the face. And what the king said to him, this is what's deep. The king said to him, as he told him about the problem, he told him about the walls. They had fell down. But the king said, what is it you want? And we can't just look at the desolation in our life. We can't just look at what we don't have. You have to have clarity. What is it that you want? What is it that God is calling you to? Can you answer that question? Where is God? I need clarity. Somebody here, I hope somebody hears me this morning. And somebody, before you leave this place today, you get clarity about the vision that God has for your life. Because you can't keep going around talking about, I don't like my life. I don't like what's going on. I hate my job. I hate the people around. I want some. You got to decide, what is it that you want? What is God calling you to? That's the question. So Nehemiah, and this is what I talked about last week. I mentioned this briefly, but Nehemiah basically said, I need a leave of absence from my job. Boss, I need a leave of absence. Not only do I need a leave of absence, but I want you to give me a blank check to finance my dreams. Anybody ready to do that tomorrow morning? I said, boss, we need to talk. I'm leaving. I'll be back in 6 months. I want my regular pay. Not only do I want my regular pay, but I need you to give me a loan so I can finance my business, right? But this is basically what Nehemiah is saying. But guess what? Because Nehemiah was strategically placed and did his job well, the king said, I'll give you what you want. That's serious. How many people, your boss loves you enough where he'll let you get what you want, right? So the key thing is, even when you're in a job that's not desirable, you better make sure you're doing it on a standard of excellence. You can't say, I don't like my job, so I'm a half step. I'm not going to give it my best. I'm going to be late with the deadline. Because people notice that. Oh boy, people sure enough notice. So even if you don't like your job, you better give it your all. While you're there, you better shine. You better be the best at what you do. I like what Dr. King, you said, if you're a janitor, you better be the best janitor. You're a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper. Whatever you do, give it your all, because you can be in a position where the Lord has you strategically placed, not only to help you with what he's calling you to do, but you can help somebody else what God is calling them to do. Oh, that's serious. Anybody ready for that? But it starts with clarity. Tell somebody, you've got to know what you want. Tell somebody else, you've got to know what God is calling you to. You've got to know that. Because many times we don't have clarity about what it is. Clarity, a clear head, a natural state. In a book called Clarity, Jamie Smart says that clarity is called clarity, clear mind, better performance, better results. And I like what he says. He said, if a pond is clouded with mud, there's nothing you can do to make the water clear. But when you allow the mud to settle, it will clear on its own. Because clarity is the water's natural state. And clarity, it's a natural state. But we allow our minds to be convoluted. Over the years, people have poured negativity into your mind. People have told you you can't do it. People said, oh, you're a woman, you're black, you're Latino, whatever it is, you're a man, whatever it is. People tell you you can't do things. And you allow that. When we're born as children have a clear vision and they can dream the impossible. But as we get older, we allow people to pour negativity into our mind. And as we age, we've reached points where we think, well, maybe I can't do it. Maybe I'm not talented. Maybe my destiny is being broke. Oh, we're gonna say right now, the devil's a lie. How many people say, no, my destiny is not being broke? Oh, no. My father is rich in houses and land. And we got to declare it, because if you don't declare it, you don't believe it. And you've got to believe. You have to have a clear state. So what he's saying is that, what Jamie Smart is saying, the natural order of things is clarity. And so the natural order is for you to have a clear vision of what God's calling you to do. But over time, again, it's negativity. It's the world. And we get to points where we say, well, I can't. And you start to believe it. And then you say, oh, well, maybe I can. You give yourself pep talks. But deep down inside, you don't have the conviction that the Lord can use you in a mighty way. You don't have the conviction that the Lord can use you in an extraordinary way. The Lord can use you to bless somebody else. The Lord can, as Paul says, the Lord partners with us. But we reach the point where we don't have the vision. We think it's anybody but me. Come on now, let's just keep it real. How many of us are at the point where we say the blessing is for somebody else? And we think the financial blessing, the health blessing, the job blessing, it's not for me. It's something I'm supposed to witness somebody else do. But you better believe that you are entitled to God's grace yourself. That you're entitled to God's blessing. I know I do this all the time, but the reason why I do it, I want you to say it to somebody else, because when you say it, you believe it. You ought to tell somebody that I am blessed. You ought to tell them, don't evaluate me by how I look right now, or you know my job, you know my financial situation. Tell them, don't get it twisted. The Lord is doing something in my life. The Lord is blessing me. Say, I know I borrowed money from you last week and said I'd pay you back this Sunday, but I still know the Lord's going to bless me. Now people are starting to get funny because, oh yeah, that's right, you did borrow money from me. And you did say you were going to pay me back this Sunday, right? But the Lord is blessing you, and you have to believe it. You have to have a clear state. Nehemiah knew the walls had fell down, and he knew that he was depressed. But he could have been depressed and went on with his job and said, I'm fine where I am. I've got a good job. But a good job is not enough sometimes to make you feel fulfilled. And the wine taster, this right here, he had a good job. He was in a good place. He was in a great, prestigious position. But you ought to ask yourself, is the job enough? Is what you're doing for a check enough? Is it your occupation, or is it your vocation? Because we've talked about the occupation is what you do to occupy time. The vocation is a calling. And you got to say, I don't want an occupation. I want to fulfill my calling. I don't want just a check. I want to do what God's calling me to do. Oh boy, somebody ready for that? Somebody ready to tell your boss, I'm ready to do what God called me to do. Here's my notice. Well, matter of fact, not yet. Give me 12 months. Figure this out first, right? Don't quit your job. So again, if a pond is clouded with mud, there's nothing you can do to make the water clear. But when you allow the mud to settle, it'll clear on its own, because clarity is the water's natural state. Clarity is your natural state. But you allow the world to confuse you. You allow the world to put things, negative thoughts in your mind, and get to the point where we don't have self-confidence. We don't really feel like it. Come on, Christians. We say it, and we talk about it. We say, yeah, I'm too blessed to be stressed. I'm too anointed to be disappointed. But then we go home saying, I don't have it. I don't have the talent. I don't have the ability. I'm struggling. I'm supposed to be like this. The devil's a liar. Because once you believe that's your normal state, then you're going to act like it's your normal state. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But when you have the power of your words, God took darkness and said, let there be light. With God, he has the power. Even in the midst of darkness, he can say light. In the midst of your depression, he can say joy. In the midst of your financial calamity, he can say wealth. In the midst of your sickness, he can say health. You got to believe that whatever state you're in, it's the power of your words. The power of your words, to use your words and to make a declaration that the Lord is blessing me, that I am gifted, that I'm anointed, that I have talent. You got to declare it in the midst of the storm. You got to say, I see the light. In the midst of the bad relationship, you got to be able to tell yourself, I'm going to have relationships of joy. In the midst of a bad job, you got to tell yourself, I will have the job of my dream. I hope I'm talking to somebody this morning. Anybody ready to declare it? Anybody ready to speak it into existence? Anybody ready to realize, as Paul said, that we have every blessing in heavenly places? The good thing about having a blessing in heavenly places is that the devil can't touch what the Lord put in your name. Because once it's in heavenly places and the Lord declared it, you ought to tell yourself it's in heavenly places. I've got to make sure it manifests itself in reality. Oh, so if I'm going too deep, let me know. I'll come up for air for just a minute. But you got to be able to declare it. Is anybody ready to declare it? Y'all don't sound like you are. You've got to declare it, that the Lord is blessing you in your life. Everybody here, you got to declare it. You can't believe that the person next to you is entitled to blessing and you're not. Clarity. Clarity. It's the quality of being clear. It's the sharpness of image. It's having a vision. And the thing about it is that clarity is that when I talk about clarity, we're talking in the spiritual sense. So I'm talking about not just having a vision on your own, but I'm talking about a revelation. Because a revelation comes from God. I'm not just talking about what you see for your future, but you praying and saying, Lord, what do you see for my future? Lord, how are you blessing me in my life? Because when you have a revelation, that means God is communicating to you a picture of where you can be. And again, the picture of where you can be has nothing to do with where you are now. Because what we do is we reduce ourselves to the level of our experience. We reduce ourselves to our everyday circumstance. And we believe that everyday circumstance is who we are. But when you have a revelation, you can be in the midst of darkness, but God gives you a revelation of light and a blessing of where you're going to be. I hope I'm talking to somebody this morning. I hope somebody hears me this morning. That's it. Greatness begins with a vision of where you want to go. Or not just where you want to go, where God is calling you to. That's it. That's a revelation. You've got to have a revelation for your life. I love what the motivational speaker Tony Robbins says. He says that we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. And so many of us, we put it all into 12 months. Oh, we do the New Year's resolution. Oh, this is going to be my year. I'm going to make it happen. I'm getting out of debt this year, better health this year, relationship with my dreams. We cram it all in 12 months. But then you go into the next year with the same resolutions that you had the year before. Because it can't be done in a year. You've got to ask yourself, what is the long-term vision that God has for my life? Because when God gives you a vision, You can be on a job that you don't like and you can still be happy. When you have a purpose, you can say that the Lord is blessing me. I don't like my current state, but the Lord is doing something in my life. I don't like where I'm going right now, but the Lord is doing something in my life. As we go to 7 years of ministry, the Lord gave us a vision. This church right now, we've got a lot of work to do, but the Lord has blessed us for 7 years. We started a church at the worst time to start a church. I would not advise anybody to start a church in Brooklyn 7 years ago. The real estate market and gentrification and all the challenges that are going. If anybody came, I said, you better pray about it. But the Lord gave us a vision to do something very simple, to create an environment for people who don't go to church. The Lord didn't call us to start a church or compete with other churches that exist. We didn't say we want to be a new Episcopal church or new Baptist church or new Pentecostal church. We said, Lord, how can you use us to create an environment for people who don't go to church? And that's what we did. The Lord blessed us. We started this ministry. We didn't have a building. We didn't have any money. When I announced the vision, people said, oh, I'm so excited. Where are you going to have your first service? I was like, I don't know yet. Oh, where's the church going to be? I'm not sure. Oh, you have any members? Don't have any members yet. You have any money? No, we don't have any money. All we had was a vision from the Lord. And when the Lord gives you a vision in your life, you better get to moving. You may not have the money that you need. You may not have whatever it is, but you better start the vision that the Lord called you to. Oh, somebody better believe what I'm saying. I gotta close in a minute. I love the story of Gardner Taylor. Gardner Taylor, it was Wyatt T. Walker, who was Dr. King's chief of staff. Wyatt T. Walker said that Gardner Taylor was the best preacher, living, dead, or yet to be born. And I had the blessing of having Gardner Taylor as my preacher in seminary, as my preaching professor in seminary. And Gardner Taylor would come in and he would put a stool down. It was a 3-hour class. And people are coming at 6 o'clock, 6 to 9 o'clock. He didn't use any chalk on the board. He would sit down on a stool and just talk to us. And he'd pour out to us. I remember one young lady asked him once, she said, Reverend Taylor, how long should a sermon be? When is it too long? He said, dear, it's long when it seems long. And I was like, how simple that is. And so it can be an hour and it seems like it's too short. It can be 15 minutes and it can be like, oh, it's too long. He said, it's long when it seems long. But I heard this great story. Gardner Taylor, I always liked him because he was from Louisiana, and I spent some of my formative years in Louisiana. Gardner Taylor, they used to say that his father was such a great preacher that people would say, oh, there's a funeral tonight. And they would say, oh, who died? Well, I don't know who died, but Pop Taylor's preaching. And so people would go to funerals just to hear him preach. And so when his son, Gardner Taylor was preaching one time, and when he was preaching, the lights went out in the church. And he was a young preacher. He was not as accomplished and articulate as the Gardner Taylor that became the legend. He was a young preacher, and the lights went out in the church. And he fumbled for a minute. He had his notes, and he couldn't read his notes. And he stopped preaching, waiting for somebody to go and fix the lights and fix the electricity. This was time when electricity was new. We take some things for granted. But this was time when the electricity was a new invention. They didn't just have to use lamps and etc. But while he was fumbling, there was somebody in the back. One of the deacons said, Gardner Taylor, you can preach, brother. Keep on preaching because we can see Jesus in the dark. And somebody this morning needs to know that in the midst of your darkness, you can see Jesus in the dark. It seems like the lights are out in your life. It seems like you can't see what's going on in your life, but you ought to tell somebody, oh, but I can see Jesus in the darkness. As long as you can see Jesus in the darkness, you're going to be all right in your life. As long as you see Jesus in the darkness, you can get through the financial problem. As long as you see Jesus in the darkness, you can get through the relationship problem. As long as you see Jesus in the darkness, whatever you're going through in your life, you're going to be all right. Can anybody declare this morning that I see Jesus in the midst of the darkness? I want somebody this morning to say, even though I'm in the midst of the darkness, I've got a clear vision about what God is calling me to do. You can call it sleepwalking if you want. You may feel like you're tired about life, but you can say, as long as I'm in the darkness, my eyes may be closed, but I can still see Jesus in the midst of the darkness. Somebody here this morning, whatever's going on in your life, I want at least 5 people to declare, I can see him in the darkness. Give somebody a high five and say, I see him in the darkness. Whatever's going on in your life, you've got to ignore the problems. You've got to tell yourself that the Lord is working in my life. Can anybody declare that this morning? Whatever thing's going on in your life, you've got to tell yourself that I am blessed, that I am anointed, that the Lord is using me, that I've got a vision, that the Lord is going to use me in an extraordinary fashion. Because guess what? When one of us are blessed, then all of us are blessed. So somebody better realize this morning that you are blessed, that the Lord is using you. He's using you. He's using, but in order for him to use you, you've got to say that I do have what it takes. That's what this ministry is about. Every Sunday, my prayer is, Lord, when I preach, please let me communicate to somebody that whatever's happened in their life, they are still extraordinary, that you have a vision for them. Ministry is not just for ordained ministers. God wants to use you. As Paul said, he wants to partner with us. Do you know what that word partner means? That means that God is saying that I need you in order to fulfill my vision. The vision that I have in heaven, I need you to fulfill it on earth. And whoever you are, whatever your degree is or lack of degree, or your finances or lack of money, or your network or lack of net, whatever it is, that's my prayer, that you realize you are awesome. Tell somebody you're dope. You are all of that. And tell them, not just you, but me too. Matter of fact, I think the Lord's even blessing me a little bit more than he's blessing you. Right? Don't say that. Say he's blessing us all differently. Right? But you got to believe it. That's it. That's it. This ministry, I've said it, as we reach 7 years, we celebrate 7 years next month. As a pastor, I've done all that I can do as a pastor to grow this church. The next step is you. You are the key. In the beginning, I admit, a vision, you need one insane lunatic to start anything. When the Lord gives you a vision, when you have a vision, you got to be a nut job. And you just got to be, I'm going to grind it out. I don't have the money. I'm going to lose sleep. I'm just going to do it. Don't always know what I'm doing. I'm going to do it. I told you the first service we started at 11. And I looked outside. I didn't want to go in at 11. But I looked inside at 11:05. And there was one person inside the auditorium. And it was my mother. So I was thinking, like, where can I move to outside of New York? But then at 11:20, people started coming. But my flesh said, oh, Lord, I was doubting from the first service. Oh, Lord, what'd you call me to do? Oh, you, like Jeremiah said, oh, you deceived me. Anybody ever feel like that in life, that the Lord tricked you? Like he called you to something. You said, Lord, you duped me. You hoodwinked me. That's what Jeremiah said. Lord, you hoodwinked me. I've been bamboozled because I didn't want it. Because sometimes the people who the Lord is using are the most reluctant people. The people that have flesh, that just want to run out and be in the forefront. God doesn't use those people like he used a quiet person who's reluctant. And so you've been reluctant, but God is saying, I want to use you. But there are times when the Lord says, I want to use you, you're reluctant, and you step forward, and then you go through a challenge, and you say, this is not what you told me. This is not what blessing looks like. Have you ever been there before? This is not what anointing looks like. And maybe you did leave the job or leave the relationship. Lord, I left the relationship. You told me something better lies ahead, but I'm lonely as I don't know what. You told me leave the job, but I was making some good money. And so, but you've got to realize when you go through that period, when you're under construction, when the Lord told you to leave something, you got to realize that there's this in-between time. And during the in-between time is when you got to trust in God. Between the time, the calling and the fulfillment of the blessing, you ought to say, God is with me in the in-between time. The key to the spiritual life is living in the in-between time. Because everybody wants to be there during the victory party. Everybody will be patting you on the back during the victory party. When you got the new job, the new book, the new success, everybody was in I was with you from the beginning. But some of the people were not returning your phone calls. They were not returning your text messages. But when you're in the in-between time, as I close, you got to tell yourself, all you need is Jesus in the in-between time. All you need is the Lord in the in-between time. Because sometimes people love you, but they can't see what the Lord put on the inside. They may love you for who you are now, but they still don't know what the Lord is doing in your life. I'm done with my message, but we want to pray for somebody this morning. Whoever it is, whatever's going on in your life. Somebody is saying, Pastor, I'm under construction. I'm going through a rebuilding phase. I need to go back to make sure that the foundation is solid. We want to pray for you this morning. Whoever you are, you can just come. The Lord will meet you as you are. Whoever you are, whatever it is. We all have different things going on in our life. We have different prayer requests. The Lord can use all of us in different ways. But we've got to say to ourselves, I'm unique. I'm anointed. I'm anointed. I love the word anointed. You've heard it in church before, but I love it because what it really means is during the Old Testament times, they were an agricultural society. And they had the oil that they put on the livestock in order to keep the flies away. And so when you're anointed, it means that you have a covering, that the parasites of life, that you're protected from them. So when the Lord calls you to do something, when you say anointed, it means the Lord's blessing me. And he's blessing me in a way that the devil can't touch what the Lord has put on the inside. So when you're anointed, it means that you got covering. It means the Lord is blessing you, not for you. He's blessing you so you can be a blessing to his kingdom. Tell somebody, I'm anointed. No, tell them, oh, you don't even understand how anointed I am. Say, you don't know what God's doing in my life. But tell them, you better watch. Tell them, meet me here 6 months from now. Oh, yeah, you're going to ask for my card 6 months from now. Just remember my name. Remember me when you see me on Oprah Winfrey show. Right? When you see on Oprah, what's Oprah's show she called, Where Are They Now? Somebody say, I'm going to be on that show because the Lord's going to bless me in a mighty way. And I'm not being facetious. I'm saying you got to realize the Lord is waiting for you to believe what's on the inside. Because so much of it is belief. Once you believe that God has something for you on the inside,